we are in disorder, they said that it's time now to put back the church in the middle of the village, which is a very good expression and a very good image. The Christendom was really this time that everything in the world was oriented to God, to worship God. The personal life, the familial life, the social life, everything was oriented to God. You know the great difference between a Protestant and a Catholic drinking beer is one is worshiping God, that is a Catholic, and the other one said, I know that is bad, but I need it, so I will do it nevertheless, and I know God will not punish me for that. So you have two spirits. One is drinking the beer, worshiping God, to a point, and the other one is thinking that he is doing a sin, but he is not responsible of it. The first public attack of the devils, which is the original sin of the modernity, it's the time of Renaissance, which is not the true expression. The true expression is Renaissance of paganism. At the time of the Renaissance, they put back paganism in the center of our life, and especially by this religion, which is the religion of Renaissance, which is Protestantism. On the more concrete manner, we have the French Revolution that Alexander Solzhenitsyn, the Russian man, said that the French Revolution was the mother of all other revolutions. And a French philosopher, a woman, Elisabeth Badinter, said that the death of Louis XVI, the French king, was a foundation, an act of foundation of the new world order. Because we need to found the new world order on a patricide. Why? Because we have to refuse any kind of transcendence. So she wrote that last year. So still now, people who are in favor of revolution are happy to let us know that the death of Louis XVI was a necessity to establish the new order, because we have to destroy any kind of fatherhood. And a French novelist, Honoré de Balzac, said that at the time of the French Revolution, at the day of the death of Louis XVI, every dad in all the families were killed. And that is normal, because the throne is on the stone on which the altar is built. The altar, the religion, rests on the throne. So the devil knows that he has to take away the throne, then the altar will disappear after. If you want, it will be very simple. If someone is taking your chair out, you will fall. It's obvious. You rest on your chair, and some of you are resting very well. I want to congratulate them. But if you are taking away the chair, obviously, the one who is right now asleep will fall. So please do that with your neighbor. Thank you. And on the closer to us is not the French Revolution, is of course May 68 in Europe and Woodstock in US. We will come back on that. But it's important to understand this work of Satan. You have to destroy the throne, to destroy the altar. You have to destroy the politic, the Catholic politic, to destroy religion. Because the supernatural reality rests on natural reality. The incarnation of the supernatural realities are on the natural realities. The supernatural does not exist by itself. It's not a word, it's an adjective. So the supernatural realities rest on nature. And nature must be crowned by the supernatural realities to keep its balance. It's a mutual relation. So the original sin of the modern time is to refuse to recognize the divine paternity, as an origin of all authority. The natural authority rests on God. And the authority is a sacred reality because its roots are in God. Now, the authority comes from the popular will. It's the fruit of the social contract, the child of Rousseau. The right of man and so forth and on, you know all that. Father Kimball will not kill me tonight, so I can dare to say that if you open the American Constitution, the first very words are we, the people. The authority is coming from us. And I can tell you that it's not an American problem, it's a modern problem. The authority comes from us and not from God, not from the paternity of God, but from the popular will. And you have here this temptation that we know well since the Garden of Eden, Satan talking to Adam and Eve, if you eat, you will be as God. You will have the authority to decide what is good, what is bad. You see, exactly the same problem. You will have the authority. You will decide. So what are the concrete actions of the revolution to understand well? As Bishop Follet told us this morning, the letter of Lucy, you have this advertisement from Lucy of Fatima that the last fight from the devil against God will be about the family. So to understand this fight, we have to describe quickly, don't be worried, what is the order in the family. You know that, first of all, that the institution of marriage is the most oldest institution in the world. Nothing destroy it so far. You have two passages in Genesis which are interesting. Is you will be married to have children, and I want to give to the man a look-likeness help. In fact, the order created by God rests on a structure, very clear. You have the union of a man and a woman to have children for heaven, but also for earth, to have children and to have also for a man a helper. And so the order rests on a structure, on a frame, on rule. And any kind of temptation to get out of this structure, of this rule, of this order, is a temptation from the devil. And we see that till our time, now we know all these attacks in the laws on divorce, now all this procreation outside the marriage and so forth and so on. We know that this institution of the marriage was the oldest and strongest institution. Our Lord Jesus Christ didn't change, as Bishop Fellet expressed, but elevated this institution. So we have a complementarity between the man and the woman, the father and the mother. And obviously that created what the modern people do not want to hear, a kind of inequality. Because if you have no inequality, you have no protection, no leader, no harmony. If everybody is look like the other one, you will not have an harmony and an order. The father and the mother have different roles, but they are complementary. And it's a balance between the role of each of them and the balance between not only one and the other, but one by the other. The father needs the mother needs the father. And it's how you give a Catholic education. So we start from what is the most basic, the mother. In a mother, and you see that in the little girl, more than in the father, in the woman, more than the man, you have a human biological behavior. You know that in the little girl, she will play with a doll. And the man, the doll, is good to play with, you know, to know how to learn the ball, but not to play with the doll. In fact, it's good to see the reaction of the sisters, but not to take care of the little doll. You have no idea of that. It's what we call the instinct, the motherhood instinct, the maternal instinct. And you see that in the field. Huh? Yesterday, I looked at one of your cows, and you have a little calf, and the calf was eating. I don't know if you say that, but the cow was standing, not moving at all, even nothing, waiting. It's a maternal instinct, you know. Don't try that with a male, it will not work, you know. But this maternal instinct is a danger. It's very good for an animal, it's not enough for a woman. Because if you stay at the level of the instinct, you have a spontaneous satisfaction. But the human maternal love is more than the maternal instinct. It's more noble and higher. If not, you have an exclusive attachment which is a danger. And it will ruin any kind of true motherhood. The true motherhood is an affective maternity. It's not an instinct. It's not enough. That is something, but it's not enough. And if we stay at the level of the instinct, a little child cannot open, cannot develop, cannot understand the world. On the contrary, the little child is putting in a cage. The true maternal love, and I don't speak about the maternal instinct here, the true maternal love is to bring the child to the father. And you know that well, you are mother here, when you had a little child, the first words that you want to teach to your children will be, after Jesus, Mary, which we can talk about that, but on the natural level, is dad. And you know the smile of your husband when he came back from work and he hears a little child say, Dad. Unfortunately, now we have all that on the Facebook and so on. When it's sacred, you know, it's a special moment. It's something for the family. That, but it's true. The mother wants to bring the child to the father. That the father will help the little child to discover the world. That is good. You know, you can hear twice since. Thanks to Charles, you can hear twice the French accent. You can say whatever, but Charles is a musician, he's an artist, and he has a delicacy. You know, he knows that the French accent is so beautiful when you speak English that he wants you hear that twice. Charles, thank you from the bottom of my heart. So, the mother will bring the child to the father, to the dad. And the dad, the child will discover the world through the eyes of the dad. And that is very important. The mother is the heart. The father is the intelligence. The understanding. Mother forms to delicacy, thank you, Charles. The mother forms to the delicacy, to the interior world. First prayers, God, Jesus, Mary. But the father is the one who is transmitting not only the name, not only his name, but the one who will introduce the child to the world, to the external world. The contact with reality, with outside, is through the father. It's the role of the father to teach that outside the world, outside home, is a world with concrete realities, which are hard, which are with a lot of constraint, necessary rules that we have no power on. And you see this complementarity between the intelligence and the heart. But the heart must be submitted to the intelligence. It's the intelligence which gives the orientation, not the heart. The heart, if the heart is above the intelligence, you go in the wall. And you know that because you cannot love someone that you do not know at all. You must know first before to answer about, do you love this one? So, mother instills into a child the limits of the authority from the father. And it's normal. How many times the mother, the mom will say, okay, you don't want to obey, it's fine. I will not lose my temper. I will talk with dad, and you will talk with him tonight. And you see the result. It's a, okay. Because the authority is there. She refers to the father not as a tyrant, but as the authority. And the simple reference to the authority put back the child in order. Because it's the father which gives to the child his structures by transmitting to him the necessary keys to understand the world and understand the rules of the world. And so the child needs the maternal affection and the paternal, that is difficult for me, thoughtfulness. You know, the thoughtfulness is not from the mother. What is the affection? The affection is a love of benevolence. The thoughtfulness is a love of prevenance. And the father will help the little child by letting him know that outside it's a world with its rules. And we have to be prepared to enter into this world. And it's a paternal thoughtfulness which make a child an adult. If you do not have that, you will have a very old teenager, or if you prefer, a teenager forever. So the father, the dad, is the first symbol of authority, symbol of a sacred reality. So it's through the father that you have the opening on sacredness. It's why the priest always tell you it's important that the father will lead the prayer at in the family. Is why it's important, as Sister Marie Bernard this morning insisted on, that the father will be the one who will be the reference for the faith, because it's through the father that we are introduced. It's a natural introduction to sacredness. And this opening on sacredness gives to the child the notion of respect, of admiration. And so when you have respect and admiration, what are you able to do? To love. If you do not have respect, if you do not have admiration, you do not love. You take advantage, but it's not to love. To love, you must have respect and admiration. So the father in the normal world is the reference and is one who is giving the orientation. That is the order willing by God. Now we'll speak about the disorder. And first, it's the Renaissance. With paganism putting back, man is the center from the Renaissance. The right of man is a break of order, a new perspective. And so this modern world refuses the limits and dependence. And is really the temptation of the original sin of Adam and Eve. I am the one who will define the limits, the authority to define what is good, what is bad. is not to be submitted to an order given by God, is to define the order. And I am the one who is defining the limits and the order. So in the modern world, we passed from the contemplation of the world, from the domination to the world. And the technology of today does not help us as for sure. So the first step was Protestantism. The Protestantism is a negation of the original sin. And at the end of the day, this negation becomes an exaltation of the original sin. We have Immanuel Kant, he's a philosopher, a German philosopher, but a Protestant, who said, the original disposition of a man is a disposition to good. At my point of view, Kant was never a rector of a seminary. The disposition of the man is not a natural disposition to the good. It's not true. We know all that quickly. And we see, on the contrary, as it was said this morning, that the inclination of the little one, even at 3 years old, is to go to evil. After you have the philosopher of the time of Enlightenment, you have Rousseau, with his refusal of any kind of society and the exaltation of the good savages, and his attack against any kind of authority. And you have the French Revolution, of course, with this sentence that I told you from Elisabeth Badinter: the democracy is not compatible with the paternal power. Any kind of emancipation, she said, any kind of emancipation is first of all a liberation in relation to the father. The popular sovereignty was born from a patricide. And she said at the end, we will understand that the rejection of the king and the father is here more deeply the one of any kind of transcendence. It's exactly what will happen with now this equality, we have to be equal. And this terrible thing now, they want to have a child without a father, and so they don't know what to do. Or they call parent 1 and parent 2, but if you say parent 1 and parent 2, you have a difference between 1 and 2 is an inequality. So we are at this stupid constatation. And so you have this introduction of all the laws, take the question of the divorce. Perhaps Bishop Ferrer or Father Abbé will tell me that I'm wrong, but I think 1 century ago in Valais, in Switzerland, it was, if you tried to do a divorce, you go to jail. I will not say that now if you do not try, you go to jail, but quasi, it's so in the... And you can understand this French author at this time who say is André Gide, family, I hate you. And the destruction of the family by taking away the keystone of the family, the fatherhood, is really what the revolution, the French Revolution, wants to do. And you understand that. You have a building, you have walls, you have a roof, and you have the keystone. You take away the keystone, little by little, the roof will collapse. And the walls will collapse as well. It's very well done. After, we do not have time, we have to know that we have this school of Frankfurt with Gramsci, with Marcus, with May 68 in France, with a lot of slogans. And that is proves that you not have a father when you have slogans. People are thinking they are repeating something, or it's forbidden to forbid, or any kind of authority is a crime, or dad smell very bad. It was what they said in the street at this time. Or if you prefer, yeah, Woodstock, the year after in US, from the Youth International Party, which is the hippies, and one of the founders of this movement said very clearly, kill your parents. More suffering for us was Vatican II and the desacralization of the liturgy. Of God is no longer a father that we are giving devotion, adoration, but a very good friend, a camarade. Some people who did the French Revolution, as Lee Quignot, he was the judge, said he would be happy for the humankind if all the children will not know their father. Or another one who was the president of the French Assembly before the time of the terror, 1 year before, he said the state must take over the man before his birth. Because the man in the womb of the mother belongs to the patrie, to the country. And you have the utopia of Plato here. We said the children are less to the parents than to the city. And you have a French author, a modern one. He has some problem right now. His name is Yann Mox, but don't take that in your memory. He said the true revolution, the true equality will be to mix the babies at their birth. You know, you arrive somewhere to have children, and, you decide that this one will be with this one will be with his parents. Why not? That it will be the best. And in fact, what we see today is only the application of the French Revolution motto, liberty, fraternity, equality, without fatherhood. That does not work. So now we will see what happens inside the families. So we saw that the father is the one who brings the child to the reality. But he can do that if the mother brings the child to him. The child knows that he is loved by his parents and loves his parents. The French Revolution is an utopia, and the utopia is to hate real, and to hate any kind of roots. If you have roots, you can have a tree. If you have a tree, you can have a fruit. So we have to destroy the roots. And now they reduce the motherhood, the maternity, to the maternal instinct. And so the child is not facing in his education the difficult, hard roads of reality. He is living in the world under the domination of the heart, the emotion, the feeling, and he is in the intuitive world in which to think is not the good place. And we are used now to give the benefits to the last one who make us crying a lot. And so it's not a world in which we are prepared to face the reality and to become an adult. And so I want to give you now the concrete consequences. First of all is a lack of compass. The father is the one who gives the orientation. And now, you have no orientation, you have only passions. And so if you lose your orientation and the movement of your intelligence to understand the world, you cannot be submitted to the reality. And what is the true definition of liberty? Is a voluntary submission of an external order. As the man who said, don't be worried, Father, it's my phone. As a man who said, I am a pilot now, I do not have to submit myself to the external laws, I will do what I want. It will crash. We have to be free, to be really a free man, to be submitted to reality. The second consequence, the concrete consequence, would be no reference, no rules, no principle. What is good is to feel good. I want to feel good. I love to feel good. When I feel good, I'm great. So the rule is replaced by stereotypes. And we are in the world of people who are very conformists. We have to conform to the world around us. And what is terrible, these stereotypes and this conformism, is that take away from a man the curiosity, the good curiosity. Aristotle said a man is per nature a curious intelligence. He wants to discover the world, he wants to discover what is around him. Now that is away. We are surrounded by people who have no interest whatsoever. The third concrete consequence will be they are losing the sense of taking risk. And that is very important. A mother protects, and that is good. But the dad teaches the child how to protect himself. And that we call it the virtue of prudence. To take the good decision in the concrete of your life. Prudence and common sense are given to the child by the father. And don't be surprised why so few people are acting with prudence and have some common sense. It's because they have no father in front of them who teach them the law of reality. What happens? A lot of violence. Because they reject the natural authority, nevertheless, they need some authority, because it's in the nature of man. And so they enter in gang. They enter under a lot of difficult trials, and they submit themselves to a tyranny. And you see that a lot of people are taking crazy risks for nothing, to jump from a bridge and to have an elastic, hoping that the elastic will be strong enough, which is more and more difficult in US. Huh? But it's something which is stupid, you know. They don't take the risk of day to day, but they love to have a risk. They put in danger their life for nothing. Also, this refusal to take risk introduces us in the world with zero risk, no risk at all, a comfort. But in this world, violence is replacing interdicts. Before we have rules, we know that is forbidden to do that and that and that. And if we do it, we are taking a risk. Now it's over. And we replace this world by pleasure, drug, because we need some stimuli to keep us going on. In fact, this generation is looking for limits because nobody gives limits to them. It's over. You know, the little child who is taking something and put it on the table. It's fine. But Sudani put under the table and it falls. He does not understand that, you know. After a time, for some of us it took time, we understand that is solid and that is not solid, you know. But we still do it. Why? Because now we are testing something else. The authority of our mother, of our father. And if they don't say anything and they continue to give us back the spoon, we are testing the limits. Where are the limits? I am the king, completely the king, absolutely the tyrann. I can continue. And that is terrible. We are facing a generation who does not know the limits and they are continuing. And the last concrete consequences will be the attitude in front of the difficulty of life. And they will immediately tell you, oh, no, I am under pressure. No, it's too much. Or, I'm frustrated. I'm upset. No, it's the contrary it is. It's the difficulties, a constraint. But it's normal. They don't love and they don't accept the reality. Quasi-finally, the extension of that is we are living in the state with the provident state. Molly society, you say that? The motherhood, how you say that? Yeah. Word. I will teach you English after, Father, don't be worried. And you have also the lose of the sense of justice. Because justice rests on rules. If you take away the rules, where is justice? You have the loss of the sense of sacredness. And Vatican II didn't help, for sure. And also for the school. For the school, you have to learn, not with difficulties, but with playing, always playing. We have the caricature of Montessori, you do what you want, when you want, and as you want. But it's that, you have to play, always to play, and not to be strong. In conclusion, we are facing a complete collapse of the society. Is a dissociety, that is a word created by Marcel Decourt, a Belgian philosopher. But the dissociety as a name is a barbarian state. But again, all these attacks, you have a direct attacks against God. I will quote for the last time Elisabeth Badinter. Even if God was love, she said, even if God was love, the modern man will refuse him. Why? Because it seems that God can love only as a father. And so the modern man cannot bear this idea. So, do we have to fall in despair completely? No. We have the key. We have the hope. And we have to come back to our founder, Archbishop Lefebvre. In this jubilee in Paris, he said that we have to launch a crusade of the fathers of the families. And that is very true. To come back and to give to our society the sense of authority, the sense of sacrifice, the sense of the rules, the sense of climbing the mountain of reality, the sense of joy, the sense of the reconquest is why you are here. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Father.
So the last talk was on fatherhood. So was there anything in particular that struck you about the talk? Put it that way.
I suppose, being a new father myself, I'm only a father probably 4 years at this point. And I suppose since coming to tradition myself, I probably wouldn't have known what it meant to be a father, in the sense that I guess I was brought up as, I suppose, a Novus Ordo Catholic. I never really took my faith seriously. I didn't know what it actually meant to be a father, I guess. And I suppose the most important thing I think that Father touched on was the authority in men nowadays, I think, has just totally fallen by the wayside. Men aren't treated with the respect I think that they should be treated with, and I think I suppose it goes. There's two parts to this. I think in reality, there's the fact that men are no longer really men, and I think also the fact that women are no longer really women.
Right.
And I think both parties are to blame. As I feel, I suppose feminism has totally ruined manhood, and it has taken away the authority of men, and it has trampled on men's, I suppose, their God-given authority. It's no longer what it would have been in the past. I don't think women can be blamed for that. I think men also have a role in that, in the sense that men need to step up, and they need to, like Father said, they need to take risks. They need to have a bit more courage. They need to take a stand on issues. They need to get out there. They need to raise their voice, and they need to fight back and not have this, I suppose, I don't know, this millennial mentality of just sitting in the corner and feeling like you're the victim or something. They need to get up and actually have a bit of passion in what they do. I think that was the main thing, I think, to be honest, that I took away from it. But I suppose it's not really until I learned the faith myself that I suppose my opinions will change on it over the last couple of years.
Yeah. And who's going to win the All-Ireland tomorrow?
Today, don't you mean?
Oh, today. See, I don't even know any longer.
I'm probably missing it at the moment. But up the kingdom.
So there you go. Kerry for Sam.
Indeed.
Of course, Kerry, yeah. Isn't this a wonderful conference though, isn't it?
It's a great conference, yeah. So many people here. So many young people, young families and everything. So, yeah, it's great, fantastic. And so many children.
Absolutely. It's a sign of life, isn't it?
Well, that's it. I mean, you couldn't fit everybody inside here, actually. It's good. So all the children playing outside and all the smaller children then inside, trying to, Mammy and Daddy, hoping to stay asleep.
Yeah. It's nice to hear a philosophical approach to our problems, isn't it? Like Father LaRue, he's talking about the roots of the problem.
Well, I hope a philosophical solution to the problems, rather, so yeah, that's
brilliant, rather than we're looking at the surface level, it looks like it's all chaotic.
And Father as well, of course, his father is a seminary teacher, isn't he?
Yeah.
So there you go, he's helping form some of the priests of the future as well. Yeah. It's very important as well that masculinity is seen in priests.
It's a key role, isn't it, really, the priesthood? We need that kind of formation, the traditional formation. Absolutely, yeah.
It's good to see the priests, I guess, that have that courage to be able to stand up and talk like this, because I guess men these days have become soft, like I was saying, and they no longer have the heart and courage to do things like this and to stand up and to talk and to speak the truth, I guess. And yeah, that's definitely not. It's not commonplace anymore. And the fact, and there isn't even, I suppose, just common sense in the world anymore. It's like
no.
People have lost touch with reality, I think, at this point.
Well, I don't envy anybody who's rearing children and now has to consider their schooling, because when you think of what's going through the schools, we'll see some of that later on. But I mean, are you going to homeschool, you think?
Oh, I don't think you can even entertain the idea of sending your kids to school anymore. You might have been able to manage it back a year or 2 years ago, but with the latest stuff that's coming in, I mean, you couldn't in good conscience send your kids to school anymore. It's just
not even a Catholic school.
Sorry?
Not even a Catholic name school?
Oh, not even a Catholic school. I mean, like, sure, it's only Catholic in name at this point. I don't think you could. Yeah. They've totally given in to the whole new RSC thing and all the new things that are coming down the line. So, I mean, it's just, it's perverts at the moment that are basically responsible for raising and educating your children.
Speaking of Catholic education, we've got a good Catholic educator here. So,
hello, Liam. Yes. Oh, yeah, this is a fantastic conference. And I have to say, even though I'm a teacher and I've done all the teacher training and teaching for many years experience, this conference has really made me take a step back and think more deeply about what is the purpose of education, to equip the young people in order to, to take on the world and to look at it from not just a natural perspective, but a supernatural perspective. And I'll tell you, it's funny, of all the in-services I've went to over the years that's trained me how to teach science better, I've never really, I wish all the teachers, all the people I work with could come to a conference like this where they would actually think deep and meaningfully about the role of education and our purpose in the world and our duty to Almighty God. So I think it's a wonderful conference. Yeah.
So even though we're not even finished yet, there's still a few speakers to go. Is there anything so far, more than anything, that struck you as, as a man, as a father, as a teacher, as a Catholic man?
Yeah, well, certainly, I suppose the recent speaker, Father LaRue, was talking about fatherhood, and I really never thought, he really put into perspective how really important the role of being a father is. And very simply, and I already I'm the father of a 2.5-year-old, and we already see among ourselves, between my wife and myself, we've different perspectives on how we deal with the wee lassie. And sometimes we think that these different approaches can cause a tension, but there shouldn't be a tension. They're both actually complementary. And what Father said is that the role of the mother and motherhood is to protect the child, and the role of the father is to train the child to protect themselves in the world. And that the child, this is what I found quite striking, and I have to think about this a lot. But as Father was saying, the role of the father is to introduce the child to the world, and they will see the world through the father's eyes. Look, it's a massive responsibility, and it means that, people think, to be a dad is easy. Being a father, to do it right, try to do it right, it's an immense task. But one I'm delighted to give a go. But it's tough. There's a lot of pressure on us, but that's what we're made for.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I suppose one of the things that I've learned, just being, like I was saying, being a new father, I guess, is I had a girl first and I have a boy lately, and one of the things I've learned, I suppose, is the vast differences between the two. As in the beginning, when you have a small girl and she's quiet and playing with her dolls, lining them all up, and then I'll see my younger son coming out the moment he'll come in and start bashing the dolls off the countertop and everything. But it's
toxic masculinity.
That's it. See, it's boys being boys at the end of the day, and exactly. I think it's what needs to be encouraged, and to basically acknowledge the differences between the two sexes, and as in, I suppose, like Liam was saying, that they complement each other, and it's not something that should be focused on, or you shouldn't be trying to change boys and girls or girls into boys or vice versa. Each of us have our roles, and we need to stand up, and we need to basically acknowledge our differences, and the two need to work together to create the proper family structure to raise kids in. So I suppose I guess we'll probably hear more about that now, I'd imagine, in the next talk.
So with only 5 minutes, well, you want me to keep, okay. No pressure. So I'll ask the same questions again, I suppose. So who's going to win the All Ireland football final?
Kerry.
There we go.
Yes.
Up the kingdom.
Up the kingdom. Yeah.
I'm not even going to get to see the game, I'd say.
I forgot it was on today. I was thinking on Sunday always. Of course.
Yeah. It's going to be Kerry by 4 points.
There we go.
Yeah.
And apologies to all of our Dublin viewers.
If it turns out not to be the case, you will delete this section in the recording. Yeah.
It'll be taken down and used in evidence against you. But, So we're just getting, crowds are coming back into the hall, so just get ready for the final couple of talks, and but people's enthusiasm isn't waning anyway. Normally at this time of the day, after lunch, people want to close their eyes and rest a little bit, but people seem to have kept their enthusiasm up. Would you say? Am I putting words in your mouth?
No, it seems to be a decent kind of atmosphere here. Everyone's it's good, I suppose, to meet a lot of like-minded people here as well, and you can mix everybody and get it's good to see that you're not alone, I guess, in this messed up society at the moment, that there are other people out there that have similar beliefs as ourselves, so it gives you courage, and it gives you a bit of hope for the future as well, so it's good to see.
Right.
Yeah, I would concur with that. We often find that we're living in a society where the state wants to rear our children, and it's great to come here and meet other people who take the job of rearing children very seriously. I know there's more than us, but I would encourage anybody, when this conference comes around again, please come here. It is so enlightening, and you know what? It gives you a bit of a buzz. I can go back now to the daily grind, knowing that I'm not on my own. There's other people going through the same, and I suppose numbers help. To know that you're not alone is just, it's wonderful. It makes the burden easier to carry.
Very good. All right. Thanks. So we're just going to prepare now for the next talk.
Please take your seats. Please take your seats. Sigi Shias Leverdal. Thank you very much. Our next speaker is from the United States, from New York. She is married with 4 children and has great knowledge of the issue of feminism in the modern world. And her talk is entitled Feminism and the Eternal Woman. Can you please welcome Miss Elissa Betts.
Be a woman and do what you will. This quote is by Gertrude von Lefort, and it may seem like a very feministic way to start off, but I find it ironically appropriate for the subject. In a world bombarded with so much gender confusion, it's hard to keep or really understand all of the Catholic principles behind the roles of man and woman, but especially woman. So I'd like to take a couple of the ideas of Gertrude von Lefort in the book The Eternal Woman, in the hopes of creating more understanding and shedding some light on who we're called to be in light of the eternal. More specifically, I hope to inspire women, regardless of your vocation as a wife, virgin, or mother, to imitate Our Lady in her complete fiat to God, in her life dedicated to his love. So to start, I'd like to go all the way back to Genesis, to the very beginning, to the line that says, God created them in his image and likeness. In his image and likeness he created them. Male and female, he created them. This one line contradicts so much of our modern society now, because we tend to think equality is when we can do the same thing as another person. So when a man does the same thing as a woman, or a woman can do the same thing as a man, we tend to think that is equality. But this line contradicts that. This says that we are both made in his image and likeness, and because of that, we're both equal. And God loves us equally, unconditionally. And when we say we're made in his image and likeness, God wants to look into our souls and see his image reflected back to us. It's similar to God the Father and God the Son, where God the Son perfectly mirrors God the Father, so much so that they're both God. And obviously we're imperfect, we're humans, we can never do this. But God takes his qualities, his polar opposite qualities, like justice and mercy, and he divides them and gives half of them to women and half of them to man. And in this way, men and women together reflect more perfectly an image of God than we could by ourselves. And so God takes justice, strength, and power and assigns those to men. And women, he assigns beauty, love, and mercy. And so we reflect these qualities, and together, men and women complement each other and reflect the more perfect image of God. But when we say women reflects the mercy, love, and beauty of God, our modern world looks at that and tends to think that's demeaning, that's less than, because men represent the power of God, and so we tend to automatically think women aren't powerful, and it's less than to represent his love. But God is love. Love is such an essential part of God that it's such a great honor for us to represent this. It's a more spiritual thing, it's more abstract, and so it may not look as powerful, but it's something very beautiful. It's a great honor that we have. And we represent this spiritual aspect of God in a lot of different ways. Women are more naturally drawn to the spiritual than men. Women are made from Adam's rib instead of the dust of the earth. And in creation, women is the last one created. The order of creation goes from lowest to highest. And so in that sense, woman being the last one created is the highest, only in that sense. But also, woman gets to work with God hand in hand for 9 months at the beginning of every person's life. She works with God in a way that man doesn't. She forms the body of the person with God. Woman also has the gift of feminine intuition, and she's also represented by Eve, the mother of all living, and Mary, the mother of God. And all of this is not to say that a woman can't do a man's work, because she does and always has. When her husband dies, a woman fills in for her husband. When the men go off to war, the women do the men's work. And this is the way it's always been. So it's not to say she can't do these things, but her role is to represent the beauty, the love, and the mercy of God. And so take this thought with you into the Annunciation. We all know the scene of the Annunciation. The angel Gabriel comes down from heaven and asks Mary to be the mother of God. And when he does this, she becomes an ambassador, a representative for the whole human race. And this is fitting because she represents the spiritual, because she represents love, but also because she is the Immaculate Conception. She is the most perfect image of God, a human image on earth. She didn't have any stain of original sin. She didn't have any sin in her soul. So she is the most perfect human mirror of God's image that ever existed. And so when the angel came, he asked Our Lady for her permission to start the work of redemption, the most important succession of events that ever happened in human history were contingent on Our Lady's permission. God asked, and he waits for her to say yes. She had free will, just like we all do, and she could have said no. And so the same scene happens over and over in our souls. God wants to do his work in our souls, but he asks, And he waits for us to say yes, like Our Lady did. He waits for us to give that fiat, just like Our Lady did. And the fiat can sound demeaning because we give something up, it's a surrender. But the word fiat in the English language is a legal term to mean to give permission. So this implies so much power and dignity. Because of that respect for our free will, we have the ability to say no. We have that dignity, that power. And so the fiat becomes the only true power that we have as humans. The only way that we can work with God in redemption, to use our free will to give that fiat to him. And so when we give that fiat, it is a response of our love to God for his love. Because he existed first, he created us first, and so he loved us first. So when we give that fiat back, when we love him back, it's a response to his love. And that's where the woman's vocation comes in. She gives that response of love for love, as we'll see later on. But this idea of surrender has terrifying connotations. You just say that word, and it sounds like something terrifying, it sounds like something negative, and most times it is. We think of a general in an army. He and his men are willing to die for certain principles, and when they surrender, they're giving something up, they're losing something. They have higher principles, and when they surrender, they're losing them. It's a loss. But this is not so with God. When we give to him, we're giving ourselves to him, to something higher. And so we don't lose anything. God would never take advantage of us. He's infinitely good. And everything we give to him, he gives back 100-fold. So we can give ourselves completely to him. Let me give you an example of a positive example of surrender. I'm not sure if they have it here, but in the United States there are painting classes where you can go in with absolutely no artistic ability and walk out with a pretty decent painting. So I went to one of these and I walked in and I saw the painting that we're supposed to walk out with. And my first thought was, there's no way. I can't do this. Maybe he's not as good as he thinks he is, or maybe I was supposed to have some talent first, but I don't. But I was there, so I decided I'll trust him. So I start the class, and I'm 2 hours in, and my paintings look, semi-decent. And all of a sudden I spill black paint on the lower left section of my painting. And I'm sitting there thinking, do I throw away 2 hours of work? Do I hang it in my living room and pretend people have a blind spot right there? But the painter comes behind me and he says, okay, this is what you do. In art, you pretend the mistakes were supposed to be there. And I'm thinking, I don't see how that's possible. But he takes green paint and black paint and he starts shading and painting, and he makes the clump of grass that looked like I really meant it to be there. And so in this example, God is the expert and we're the amateurs. We're like toddlers with crayons trying to paint and we have no idea what we're doing. But if we can trust him and if we can permit him to coach us, he can do so much good in our souls if we can give him that fiat. But take this example one step further. Imagine if we were to not only follow his directions, not only let him do his work, but if we were to place our hands in his. And if he could guide our hands and do the work with us, imagine how much more perfect that would be. Imagine how beautiful the painting would be on the canvas of our souls. And all of this is because of the fiat, because of that return of love for love. And so this idea of the fiat also comes into play in marriage. It's a very different thing though. When we give the fiat to God, we can surrender ourselves completely to him. We can give everything to him, as I said before, knowing he won't take advantage of us. He's perfect. He will give back to us 100-fold. But when you give in marriage, they're two imperfect people. And because they're imperfect, they will hurt each other. Even the mess of husbands or wives, it's just human nature. And so as a wife, you don't give yourself to your husband completely, totally, because that would be taking God out of the picture, and only God deserves our complete fiat. And this is because we recognize that God gave man the authority to lead. He gave man this ability. This is his role. And so the woman trusts him and gives him permission to lead. Because while he does have the power to lead, he can't actually exercise that power unless the woman gives him that permission. Because it's an equal relationship. With a teacher and a parent, or a parent and a child, it's unequal. And when the child disobeys or the child doesn't listen, there are consequences. But in a marriage, they're two equal people. And so the only way that he can lead is if she allows him to, if she gives him permission. And so again, we see that this fiat holds incredible power and dignity because it respects your free will. And we tend to think that, well, that must mean that a man's better, it must mean that he's more capable, but this is not true. The best example of this is the Holy Family. Jesus was obviously the most perfect, and then Our Lady, and then St. Joseph. But St. Joseph was the one who led the family. He was the father, he was the head of the home. It was the angel who came to him to tell him to bring them into Egypt. And so we see that with this fiat, with this giving up of ourselves, when we give this fiat to God first, and then we give through man to God again, we never give completely to a man, it allows the wife to participate completely in the marriage, fully as herself, because she's protected by the free will, because she's protected by that dignity given her by God. And so these roles given to us are not to limit us, not to control us, but because they work so well together. And when the man and the woman do this, they're able to be themselves and be loved fully for who they are. Because when you love another person, when the woman loves the man, she holds up a mirror to him, and he looks at himself in that mirror, and he can see himself for who he is, the good and the bad. Because no one wants to see all of that. No one wants to see all of the imperfections. But with that love, with that acceptance, only then do you have the strength to do that. And so that in turn allows the other person to better themselves, to become a better person, because it's only when we see who we are, when we see our flaws, that we can begin to change it. And when a woman does this, when she lives out her role so well, so fully, representing that love of God, she balances man, but not only man, she balances all of society and the whole world. Because she represents the spiritual. She brings the spiritual to man, she brings the spiritual to society. Think of it like a seesaw. There's men and there's women, and if the women all try to become men, there's an imbalance. But when women simply be who they were made to be that reflection of God, to live out that fiat, that's where that quote from Gertrude von Lefort comes in, be a woman and do what you will. It's a variation of St. Augustine's quote, love God and do what you will, which is appropriate because women represent the love of God. And so we live out this order of charity, this order of the fiat, when we first give that fiat to God, and then through that we fill our souls with his love, and then it overflows to those around us. And that in motherhood, we represent God's love in a different way. With the fiat, we give to God, and he reciprocates that love. In a marriage, you give to the husband, and the husband gives to you. There's a certain reciprocation. But as a mother, we give unconditional love. We give knowing that it will not be returned. Sometimes, or sometimes ever, but it can never be given back in the same measure that it was given. And so the definition of motherhood becomes something more than just a biological mother. It becomes a woman who gives to those more helpless than herself. And we often say that God has the heart of a mother. But really, the mother has a piece of God's heart because she so fully represents that love of God. And she is a physical manifestation of that love, of his love. And this is because just as God sees that image in our souls, that his image and likeness in our souls, the mother also sees that. And so she loves because of that, not because of what the child or the person does or doesn't do or produces or doesn't produce. But she loves because she sees good. We say that, sometimes you say that's a person only a mother could love. But this shows that the mother always finds something good to love. She'll see some potential, she'll see good intentions or hidden virtues that other people don't see. And so this idea of the mother is not just a biological mother, it's anyone who helps those more helpless than herself. And it also includes a spiritual mother. A nun or a sister is a mother because she gives that complete and total fiat to God. She dedicates her life to him. And when she does this, she becomes useless, in a certain sense, to the whole world. She's not materially producing something. She's not materially benefiting the world. But even still, God loves her because she has that image of God in her souls. And so the spiritual mother protects the rights of useless people in the world. People who have handicaps, mental handicaps, no matter how the person was conceived, no matter how old or young the person is, every person has that image of God in their souls. And the mother sees that and loves unconditionally, just like God loves us unconditionally. And so every child has a right to a mother, but every mother doesn't have a right to her child. This is because God loves us all unconditionally, so we deserve to feel that love of a mother, a physical manifestation of that love. And so imagine if every soul, every person in the whole world had a mother, not necessarily your biological mother, but someone who you knew really unconditionally loved you for who you are, who could find the hidden potential, the hidden virtues, and constantly look for that. Imagine if we could all be that woman to other people, to anyone. Amazing things would happen because people who were constantly looking for the good the good multiplies, love multiplies, and it just grows. The person changes. But this love not only changes other people, it also changes the one loving. Because when we're constantly looking for something to love in other people, when we're looking for those hidden talents, for those virtues, it becomes hard to judge other people. And so this love changes other people, but it also changes ourselves. And in this way we represent the mercy of God also. We start to grow that feminine virtue of mercy. And in this way, our lives, even if they're hidden, even if they're completely obscure, we can still touch those around us simply by being a woman, by living out that role that we have to manifest God's love through the fiat. Because when we fill our souls with this fiat, with this love of God, it overflows to those around us. It becomes a physical manifestation. At the Annunciation, the angel said, "Hail full of grace, the Lord is with thee." But this was before she even had the physical presence of God in her soul, within her. And so we see that the spiritual becomes a prerequisite for the natural. And so this order of charity, this love of God through the fiat, we live out through our daily duty of state, but also mostly through a life of prayer and of the liturgy and in union with the sacraments. And then, only then, can it overflow to those around us, to our husband, to our children, to our neighbor. And when we do this, when we have this order, it gives us the ability to live fully in the present and love others completely in that moment. Because we have an order and we know how much to love and when to give and who to give to, and so we can live completely in this present moment. And this order is something beautiful. Order is always beautiful. We look at a painting of Picasso. There's displacement, there's disorder, there's disproportion. It's not something beautiful. But this order of the charity, of the love of God, of the fiat, is beautiful. And so when we have it in the interior, it overflows to the exterior. It becomes something people can see in us. They see the love of God ordered. They see the beauty of a woman reflected in the way we dress, in the way we talk, in the way we act and carry ourselves, in the way we love our neighbor unconditionally, in the way we welcome others into our homes, into our communities, and into our churches. No matter who they are, no matter how different they are than us, we always see that every person has that image of God in their souls. We're always looking for that good in another person. No matter how tiny it is, no matter how non-existent it seems, we always find it. And so imagine if all of women who make up half of the world could be this, could give this complete fiat to God, and fill ourselves with this love, and then manifest it to those around us. We would change not only the world, but we would change ourselves. And so a simple conclusion of this is that we are each individually called to be a woman and do what you will. We're called to be a representation of God's love in the world. That love ordered by the power of the fiat and manifested to the world. And this is what it means to be a woman. Because the enmity is between the devil and his seed and the woman and her seed. So imagine the good we could do if we replicated Our Lady's love through her fiat and became imitations of the Mother of God, bringing Christ to the world. So let us be women, women who are strong in virtue, women who are beautiful in the reflection of God's love, women who are powerful in mercy. Let us be the hidden pillars that uphold society and the world. But most importantly, let us have such an incredibly strong spiritual life, a life so lost in the fiat, in the heart of God himself, that this love becomes alive in us, so that we imitate the Mother of God. Because it is in this way that we will change the world, not by becoming pseudo-men, but by becoming a form of the Mother of God. So alive with the love of God within us, that we bring not only Christ to the world, but the world back to Christ. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Betts. So now we will have a tea and coffee break for 10 minutes. And yes, we can come back in 10 minutes. Thank you very much.
So is it turned on?
Yeah, it should be right.
Yeah. So, camera's over here. So that was a very powerful talk about feminism and the eternal woman. So was there anything in particular that struck you or made an impression on you?
Yeah, I thought it was a great talk. Unfortunately, I missed the very start of it. I was like with this boy, but I thought it was great how she was talking about this woman that we should be making example of ourselves, like the fiat, and saying yes to God, and just how much of a difference that would make to the world if every woman in the world gave God that yes. I thought it was very powerful, especially whenever she said that, the devil, he is after us, and that, it's up to us to be raising our children and everything like that in the faith, and to be giving God that yes, and to be passing that down.
Yes. So I suppose as a relatively new mother as well, was there anything in particular, anything she said, any advice or something that you think you'll take home with you, something you didn't know before?
Well, I think I've heard it before, but talking about the fathers letting them be leaders, I thought it was very interesting that she was saying that in our relationship with our husbands, that we're equals. It's not the same as with a child. It's not a teacher with a parent. We're equals, so we have to allow them to take the lead, and that makes such a difference in the family. Oh my goodness. I think myself and my husband were actually giving a talk on marriage one time. I remember we were looking into statistics about children keeping their faith. Over half, it's double will keep their faith if the husband is a faithful Catholic as opposed to the mother, that they just, God has given them an authority. And yeah, just her saying that again, I remembered, oh yes, I have to remember to let my husband do that.
I suppose that's a controversial one to say in this day and age, but yeah, I mean, you can't argue with statistics.
It is, yeah, and I think you really have to work on that. It's just pride a lot of the time, and I think, well, I guess men can be too, but women are very competitive, and we like doing our best, and we like being perfectionists, so it's very difficult to take a step back and say, no, you decide this, or if you've wanted to do something and your husband says, no, I think it's better to do this, to take a deep breath and think, okay,
certain dying to the self
for the family. It is, yes, it's something you have to do every day, but she definitely made me think about that again, and a good reminder.
That's great, fantastic. Thanks very much for that, and glad you're enjoying the conference. And I suppose the next talk is on, well, relationship and sexuality education for children. Is there anything, I suppose, that worries you or encourages you as a mother on that?
An awful lot worries me on it, so I'm looking forward to listening to this talk. I'd listened to a talk recently Maria Steen gave on the topic, and we're up in Belfast, Northern Ireland, so obviously these new proposals won't be affecting us, but we know it won't be long. It will be 10, 20 years, and we'll all have very similar laws, so it's very good to keep up to date and hear about them. All new mothers are listening to them and seeing which way the schools and the Catholic schools are being forced to go as well, and so yeah, no, it's always good to know and be prepared.
Well, that's great, thanks very much for that. I will, this young man, you don't have a comparison of girls now, so I was just going to ask, do boys or girls grab at microphones more?
I've got a little girl asleep in the car.
Oh yeah.
No,
She's all right, yeah.
Yeah.
So, but she wouldn't go grabbing at the microphone.
She'd probably just be rolling around on the floor,
all right,
causing nonsense down there. And
well, great.
he goes
Out of sight.
Here.
Yes. Brilliant. Well, thanks very much for that.
God bless.
God bless.
So do you want to, you talk to Brian.
So now we have our Master of Ceremonies, Brian O'Connor. So Brian, being at the centre of things, of the organising and everything today, is there anything about I suppose it's unfair to ask if there's any one speaker that stands out, but maybe if there's even one point from each of the speakers that you could think of that you take away today, or you think people should take away today.
Well, His Lordship, Bishop Bernard Fillet, is always a highlight for these conferences because he knew Archbishop Marcel Lefebvre for so long, for so much of his adult life, all of his adult life, and learned from who we believe showed us the path forward for the church. And he understood the errors. Archbishop Lefebvre was such a successful bishop. He trained seminarians for 30 years, for which he was given awards and promoted within the church to the highest level of the church. And he always said that, how could I be now punished or even schismatic for doing exactly what I was promoted for 30 years? So, and he set up a seminary, Society of St. Pius X, in order to pass on the wisdom that he had learned himself from holy priests and rectors in seminaries.
I suppose the traditional Catholic formation of priests and, who then go to teach the traditional faith to the rest of us.
Yes, and that's exactly Bishop Bernard Fillet. He's one of the men who experienced firsthand that wisdom passed down by the Archbishop. And he said, the Archbishop always spoke of the errors of the council, that it was opening up. He founded his Society, St. Pius X. Why did he choose Pope St. Pius X? It's because he declared the error and heresy of the 20th century was modernism, which he called synthesis of all heresies, that it's this total undermining of faith at its roots. And that's why he named his seminary after that, and that's why I believe the Society of St. Pius X should be welcomed and promoted, and I encourage people to listen to their priests because they're the ones who understand why there's so much madness in society. So I would say he was the highlight, Bishop Fillet.
So after Bishop Fillet, was there anybody or anything that stood out? I suppose there's different talks with different emphasis, femininity and motherhood, masculinity and fatherhood, including, of course, spiritual fatherhood. Was there any, and of course, with our sisters in talking about Catholic education. So Sister Mary Francis, was there anything in any of their talks that struck you that, again stands out?
Yeah, Father Yves Leroux, the rector of St. Thomas Aquinas Seminary, his talk on fatherhood being, or that we live in a fatherless world where the father as the spiritual head of the family that whole concept has just been evaporated, and that if we're to return to a sane society, that has to be rebuilt from its foundations. So for the problems in Catholic education, the family, marriage, all that stem really from this collapse of fatherhood, and
everything is connected to everything else.
Yes, who said that again?
A former seminarian, Stalin, but or actually no, it was Lenin. Beg your pardon. Stalin. Yeah. So
not a seminarian.
My second favorite Soviet philosopher.
Very good. So, it was good talking to you, Liam.
Thank you, Brian.
How are you?
Well, so we've been here all day. We've had many great talks, and as I said to some other speakers, or said to some other people I spoke to, that it's unusual that at this time of the day, in particular after lunch, that people are still awake. So obviously our speakers are particularly good, but was there any speaker in particular, I suppose is my question, was there any speaker in particular that stood out, or any points that stood out for you today?
Well, for me, they're all kind of saying the same thing. And it's about giving the man his place in the home and in society, because nowadays the man is just thrown out and he doesn't know where he stands anymore in the family and society, and it's like the man has thrown his hat in and just given up and just following what the women want. Yeah. And in that way there is a lot of families falling apart because of that. Society is taking the man's role away from him.
Well, that's true, very true, but I think the last speaker was speak from a position of as a mother and as a woman. So as a woman yourself, and a mother, indeed. Bless you. It's sure. Was there anything there? I mean, rearing children yourself. How many children have you reared?
Three children. Yeah.
And what ages are they?
35, 30 and 25.
There you go. So you're still rearing some of them yourself properly. I mean, how did you find it, I suppose, trying to give them the values and, look after their education? Because if you're that age, 25 to 35, you have experienced the insanity, I suppose, of modern education and relationships and sexuality education that we're going to hear about later. But people have experience of it. So how did you, I suppose, rear your children as with the Catholic values, I suppose, in this crazy world?
Well, I did bring them up, strong Catholics, strong traditional Catholics. But when they start going to secondary school, that all changed with them.
Okay.
Yeah, things start changing with them, and it's a lot to do with the secondary schools as well, where they teach them all about other religions rather than, the Catholic religions, even though they would be in Catholic schools, but they've gone away from the faith at the moment. The children have, and I just hope that they come back someday. First, when the word out there gets a hold of them, it's very hard to get them back.
That's right, indeed. Well, thanks very much for that. We're just getting ready now for the final session this evening with Dr. John Monaghan.
You have, just so you know, there's 20 minutes extra time for tea now, or 10 more minutes now for tea. So in case you're sitting waiting for the comments to begin, 10 more minutes.
Sorry. You into you're a bit tired, yeah? Okay, so we're just talking about just look in here. Come in here. There's the camera. Yeah, so we're just talking about, you want to actually talk about just back and forth about what's going on. No. You use that as a microphone.
Yeah, okay.
So you go back and forth.
I'm getting nervous.
Oh, yeah. I'm interviewing now about the state of the roses in Chile and whether or not they're blue enough or red enough or yellow enough. Yeah.
Well, I think they should have used peat instead of tarmac.
Oh, yeah, there you go.
If they had to use peat, it would be more environmentally friendly.
Yeah, more
yeah. And they're not thinking of environment at all.
No.
I say, to hell with the rose of Tralee.
Well, that okay then? Yeah. Talk more? Yeah, okay. Well, what are we going to talk about?
I'll just hear. Well, I'll talk to both of you. Right? Hopefully we'll be in the shot there. So we're waiting for it'll be another 5 minutes before, so we're just having a conversation while we're waiting on the speakers. Okay. What do you think of isn't it really good to get this kind of conversation, these kind of talks?
The quality of the talk is fantastic. They're a great caliber of people. Very eloquent. The nun that came over from America, her name escapes me, she just hits it on the nail on the head. And it's easy to observe what they're talking about correlates with reality. The father is under attack in society. They're actually using the term toxic male. And this meeting addresses the evils that are being used to condition people, the way people think now. The fatherless family, father one, father two, mommy one, mommy two. This is the antidote to that. And the message I'm getting for this is surrender to God. Employ the graces from Our Lady, the matrix called graces. This talk is really enforcing that, motivating me, and I'm going back home with something that will help me better improve my life and understand the war, the battle that we're in, and hopefully explain it to other people.
You feel energized, don't you, after this?
I do, and I feel there's a huge consistency with the speakers. There's a huge consistency with what they're saying and the faith as it always has been taught. We don't get that today.
And Ryan, what do you think? You enjoyed the conference so far?
Yes. It's a meeting place like of all the kind of traditional groups around Ireland, and that's the best thing about it. Is meeting people from all around Ireland, you know.
And really, you say traditional, but it's just really Catholic, isn't it? It's I mean, we say traditional, but that's.
Yeah.
It's just the way it used to be.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. It's people that don't like to see Christian Ireland die a death in the way it is time. I was trying to read a book in Latin called Tragedia Hiberno Catholica, meaning the death of Catholic Ireland. It was 1652, so it didn't die then anyway. So now, but many people will say it's dying now, but it's not just yet. There's a few fellas still around that are just keeping it going.
So you think there's still hope?
There's still hope, yeah. That's my view. Yeah.
There's always hope. I don't despair, because if you look at this large group today, you can see the faith will never lose Ireland. Ireland will never lose the faith. Maybe people are leaving the faith wholesale, but the foundation is here. It's in the people, it's in the hearts of the people here. We are going to carry the faith. We're a conduit to the future, to the next generation, and it will grow, it will strengthen. It's just we're going through our own passion of the Catholic faith as Christ went through his passion of the cross, but we'll come out stronger.
Yeah, it always recovers. The Catholic Church always in Ireland recovers, but many a time it is dead long since.
So there's a lot of times before, you say.
Yeah, the Reformation, and that would be the Counter-Reformation. Absolutely, it always recovers. And mind you, it's in the doldrums now more than ever. But the other thing, this thing is, it's like you get better spirituality from humbleness. And the Irish church now is in a very humble state, So that's good, there's something spiritual there. There's something that might come up then, It'll be a better church because of it, in a kind of a way,
So you say we were arrogant, and then we lost our grace because of that.
I think there was a limited period. I mean, it's not a very long period, maybe 30s, 40s, you say early 50s. It's only a tiny period, but yeah, there might have been triumphalism or whatever, but it's certainly not there now, and hasn't been there for half a century. I mean, it can be exaggerated too, but it's just an essential humbleness, and even the priests, you're not going to stick at it to be a priest in Ireland because it's popular, because you're not popular, you're not wealthy, you're not popular.
No, the priests are suffering. They're getting it because of the sins of a handful. A lot have to suffer the consequences, and that the certain abuses that have taken place have fueled the mainstream media to attack the faith. It is really evil manifests itself in the media of today, and we can see it in the national broadcasters such as RT, BBC. It's the word according to the media today instead of the word according to the gospel.
Well, you see, with this liberalism, you can do what you want, and then you have more and more disorder, but you're not happy. It doesn't bring happiness, and I suppose this can last for a while, where people are experimenting, if you like, with hedonism, but we haven't felt the full pain, consequences of our actions yet.
There's worse to come. When the ball bounces, it'll climb, it'll rise again. We'll catch that ball and rise up, and we will throw it high. But no, the liberty, the sense of liberty is a false sense of liberty. True liberty is the freedom to do that which is right, serve God. That is true liberty.
And it's like music or art or anything. If you don't follow any laws, you might feel free as an artist, but it doesn't produce the fruit, the beauty that you can connect with other people. They look at that, they don't see what you saw as an artist if you don't follow any rules.
Yeah, well, I mean, therein lies the mystery of God in a lot of respects. He does allow human beings this liberty, and he creates societies that create more and more liberty. And but the plan is you better follow His law, because in the next life you'll get it in the neck. So that's
It's funny, ironic it is that as increased liberty of man, the hand of God, and the seal our mouths, that everyone's free except God, and if you express your love of God, you will be suppressed. In modern society, in the Ireland of today, 2019, we will be suppressed if we even show any hint that we are loyal to the Catholic.
Did you say 2018?
19.
Oh, 19. The years are flying so quickly by, aren't they? But that's the whole thing, isn't it? If you look at in the long-term perspective, what this liberty, it doesn't lead to anything. It doesn't. There's no actual purpose to it in the end.
Yeah, I suppose so, but I mean, it is true though that God does provide societies and even churches that allow liberty. Because He doesn't want anybody to come to Him except in a liberal society.
We have to understand liberty in its true sense. The freedom to do good, as you say.
The freedom to choose is essential, because then it's meritorious. If you are free to choose God, it's a meritorious. But the Catholic Church has always allowed men to adopt God through education, whereas the reformers of the 16th century, I call it not the Reformation, the Defamation, they only can spread by imposition. They impose themselves. Like if you take Ireland during the famine years, you can have soup, but you have to abandon your true faith if you want this soup. And it's all trickery. It's disingenuous. The freedom that comes from the Catholic Church, you choose freely, is a genuine freedom, and therefore your expression of love towards God in the faith is genuine. It beats the correlate.
And then you see, obviously, there's lots of children here as well, and that's the fruit of family. And we're losing that in Ireland, where people are heavily indebted, massive mortgages. People can't afford to get married, because it's just to buy a reasonable house is ridiculous money. So people are under so much debt, and then they're in college until they're 30, and they don't.
The system forces the mother to leave home to take up employment, and most mothers I know, they don't want to be in a job for life. They want to be with their children, but the society that they have created through finance and the overcharging of money is one that forces people to put the house out of the home, pay for the mortgage, and they're prisoners to the system. They're not free. It's actually the opposite of freedom. They're chained to the system, and therefore the children are separated from the mother, while the state imposes its views on the children. If you take for the UK example, parents have to ask permission from the state or the school. Can I go on holidays? And true authority, the authority as a father I have, comes directly from God. That puts my authority above that of the state when it comes to my children.
Okay, right. Well, I think we're going to get ready for the next talk. And the next talk is by Dr. Monaghan, is that right?
Well, I'm not familiar with the program.
Dr. Monaghan. He's going to talk. Yeah. So we'll be back in 5 minutes, and it should be a very interesting talk too. Right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Very good. Could you please take your seats? Sigi Shias Leverdol. Sigi Shias Leverdol.
Okay.
2 more minutes. Pardon. Very good. Thank you for your attention. So we've had many speakers here today from the United States, from France, from Switzerland, and now we have one from the Republic of Ireland. Our final speaker worked as a consultant obstetrician in Portiuncula Hospital, Ballinasloe, until his retirement. Graduated from Trinity College in 1976 and trained in the United Kingdom and Nigeria as well. He was the assistant master at the National Maternity Hospital Holles Street from 1983 to 1986, and he's worked in obstetrics for more than 30 years. He was part of the Medical Alliance for the Eighth Amendment, advocating a no vote in the May 25th referendum last year. A medical practitioner involved in the Medical Alliance described him as a quiet-spoken man who does not seek the limelight, but who has a deep conviction as to the humanity of the unborn child. Please welcome Dr. John Monaghan.
evening, my Lord Bishop, Reverend Fathers, plebs, schismatics. Maybe I should say fellow schismatics. I enjoyed the meeting very much today, and there's a lot of things I heard which I wish I had known earlier in my life as a father and a brother and various other things. So it has been very, if I hadn't this hanging over me, I would have enjoyed it a lot better, but I've learned a lot. And I hope I'm sure you have too. So the intellectual tone or spiritual tone might be going to drop a little bit. And I was told Father Kimball, who thank you for inviting me onto this nightmare, that it was very poor judgment on his part to position my talk immediately before a replay of the All-Ireland football final, because I have a lot here. So you'll be lucky if you get to this in for the second half. I'm only joking. We sort of agreed that we would try and give you some information on relationships and sexuality education, and maybe an idea of what seems to be coming down the tracks in Ireland in the not too distant future. So I was going to start by recalling an incident that happened in the hospital a few years ago, not an important incident at all, but it happened on a Saturday evening, as all, if you work in a job like mine, they always seem to happen on a Saturday evening, 7 o'clock, when there's no help around. In this case, the house doctor took a call from a neighbouring hospital which didn't have a maternity unit, and a woman had been admitted to their emergency department with severe abdominal pain, and in the course of the investigations they found that she had a positive pregnancy test and wanted to transfer the patient to us, which happened. She was moved by ambulance. It took about an hour, and when she arrived in the hospital she was quite unwell. She was shocked. She had severe pain. It didn't take very long to make a diagnosis of an ectopic pregnancy, and she was rushed to the operating theatre and recovered uneventfully. At the hospital meeting the following Wednesday, where we discussed problems in the hospital or interesting cases or teaching exercise, it's partly teaching exercise, the young doctor who took the call and admitted the woman presented the case. So we discussed the management. Was everything done correctly? What could have been improved? You know, how it all happened and so on. So at the end I said to the young doctor, well, Maria, what did you learn from all that? And she paused for a moment and she sort of blurted out, well, it just shows you can't trust anybody. And I didn't really realise up until that moment that she was quite upset about the case. She was found it very stressful. She felt that she should have been warned by the other hospital that the woman was quite ill and in an emergency, and she felt that she had been misled, which may not be the case, because it could have the deterioration in the patient's condition could have occurred while she was being transferred. But in any case, I was rather surprised at our blanket definition that you can trust nobody. So I'm very interested in the question of trust. I have been for many years. And if you ever listen to BBC Radio 4, every year there's a series of lectures called the Reith Lectures. They're in honour of Lord Reith, who was the first chairman of the BBC. And depending on the speakers from year to year, it can be quite interesting. And in 2002, the lectures were given by a Cambridge philosopher called Honora O'Neill. She's now Baroness O'Neill, and she's originally from Northern Ireland. And the title of the lecture series was A Question of Trust. And it has been written that there was more public response to this series of lectures than any Reith lectures before or since, showing that trust was a serious question among members of the public. You can still listen to those lectures on the BBC website, and they've been published as well. But she describes in detail how breakdowns in trust have happened in many areas of the health service, but also in education, politics and other areas of life. She describes one sequence which is very true, I think. And I don't know if you watched television, but a few weeks ago there was an expose Prime Time Investigates, looking at crashes in Dublin and supposed mistreatment of children. It was a very good example of what she was talking about. There's a big saturation media coverage of this, I didn't see the programme, but of this apparent neglect of children. The politicians are drawn in. What are you going to do about it? There's a response, an investigation, a committee, a People's Assembly, something like that. And a series of recommendations are made and a raft of new regulations are brought in to deal with the scandal. Honora O'Neill says, show me the evidence that increasing the number of regulations and guidelines actually solves anything. And the Dublin crashes case illustrates it very clearly because the Minister for Children, Catherine Zappone, has announced a whole raft of new regulations. Whether they do any good or not never seems to be dealt with. The people who are trying to deliver services, particularly in the health service, she goes on to say that people find it very difficult to handle the regulations, particularly if there's no resources put in to support them. One example was in schools, where in England, schools are classified on league tables. And if you're doing badly on the league tables, you get into trouble. So a school's response may be, instead of getting your students to learn physics, you start teaching them domestic economy, where it's easier to get an A, and you go up in the league tables, and the school appears better than it is. Maybe the most nefarious example in the health service would be, it's very bad news politically for the Minister for Health to have patients on trolleys, and it gets into the media. So this is from the UK again, but in hospitals, the number of patients who are in the hospital is counted at midnight. So if an ambulance arrives at the hospital, let's say 11:30, and the patient's not too bad, it may be advantageous just to leave them in the ambulance until after the count is done at midnight. And this actually happens, or has happened anyway. So the question is, one of the results of these media outcries, of course, is that the state takes more and more control by regulations, even if they don't work. So the question of trust, I'm saying, is who can you trust? And it's relevant to what I'm discussing here today, which is relationships and sexuality education. One of the most striking things about all these public moral decisions we've had over the last few years is how rapidly things happen. And we went from civil partnerships to gay marriage in the space of 4 years. We now have the police and the army marching in gay pride marches. Abortion to save the mother's life came in 2013, it becomes abortion on demand in 2018. And one of the most striking things, having been somewhat involved in all of that, is the political situation where politicians who had made pro-life statements in the very recent past can do a complete U-turn and support a liberal abortion act, and this is where trust in politicians becomes a problem. It put me in mind of a statement by Alexander Solzhenitsyn, who was mentioned earlier today. He gave a commencement address at Harvard University referred to as one of the great speeches of the 20th century. It drove the Americans mad. And he said what struck him most about the political life in the free West, which had just been kicked out of the Soviet Union, he said, is a decline in courage maybe the most striking feature that an outsider observer notices in the West today. This is written 35 years ago. The Western world has lost its civic courage both as a whole and separately. In each country, in each government, in each political party, and of course in the United Nations. So I think we have little to expect from the political side if we're looking at the question of RSE, relationships and sexuality education. And two things that were said at the end of the last referendum was, the North is next, and our next task is to sort out sex education. So the biggest input, as I will tell you later on, of those who were involved in the this RSE programme are those who were involved in the gay marriage and abortion referenda. And I have a feeling that these people, having got those referenda through, have worked themselves out of a job, and that this is their latest project in social engineering. There's one important difference, I think, between relationships and sexuality education and those two referenda. If you take the gay marriage thing, it was framed as, I want to be happy. You're depriving me of my chance of happiness. Why would you stop me? You can be married yourself. And similarly in the abortion thing, it was, I know you're opposed to abortion, that's okay, but what about me? You're depriving me of my rights. So they were asking for permission to do something that wasn't going to affect us. In the case of RSE, for the first time maybe, this bandwagon of, let's call it liberal secularism, wants to do things to us. Or worse still, they want to do things to our children. So, just to go off the point once more, the last time maybe, the retired Pope Benedict recently wrote about the sexual abuse of Christ in the church, which he attributed to two principal factors. Firstly was the sexual revolution, 1968 has already been mentioned today. And secondly was a collapse in Catholic moral theology in the 1970s and 80s, which he says left the church defenseless against the sexual revolution. The most telling sentence about the youth crisis he put in was, only where faith no longer determines the action of man are such offences possible. I think it would be fair to say that faith no longer determines the actions of our politicians or even the population at large in Ireland. The word may be apostasy, and it relates to those same two factors that Benedict has written about. The sexual revolution is being played out perhaps in the end game in the subject of RSE, our relationships. Is this a vast conspiracy? Well, I don't think a conspiratorial life is necessarily very healthy. It's likely to make you mentally ill. And sometimes the conspiracy is in plain sight and we just don't see it. I don't know if any of you have read John Waters' recent new book, Give Us Back the Bad Roads, but I would strongly recommend it as a very clear and accurate picture of where Ireland is now. And it's not a pretty picture, but it's not without hope either. And he describes in some detail his own treatment by the gay lobby when he questioned gay marriage. And he's a good writer and he's very courageous. One of the chapters in the book is called An Offer You Can't Refuse. And it gives a description of how gay marriage came about. It goes back to 1989 to a book written by two Americans called After the Ball, How America Will Conquer Its Fear and Hatred of Gays in the 90s. I'll quote, gayness has to be normalized and gays presented as victims so that straights would be inclined by reflex to assume the role of protectors. Our campaign should not demand direct support for homosexual practices. It should instead take anti-discrimination as its theme. Free speech, freedom of association, and equality were to be the issues brought to the public mind. That's 1989, but that language is very familiar, I think, to me anyway, over the last few years in this country. Various concepts were used for psychological manipulation, emotional modelling and so on, which I have not got time to go into. But going on from John Waters' description, which is well worth reading, I would like to strongly if you're interested in this area, I would like to strongly recommend a book which I only got very recently, and it's called The Global Sexual Revolution. The author is a woman called Gabrielle Kubi. She's German. It's been translated into English in 2016, I think. And she gives, I think, the best account of the history of that revolution and how the chaos created by gender ideology has become global. I found it very difficult to deal with this subject, but just briefly, if you say where did sex education come from, it probably came after, people would say after the Second World War, and it was developed initially with the intention of preventing sexually transmitted diseases and unplanned pregnancy. A more liberal and explicit education is attributed to the AIDS epidemic of the 1980s, when there was a fear that this disease was going to affect everybody. So the only objectives were the avoidance of sexually transmitted diseases and pregnancy. And did it work? Well, we can't go into the whole literature, but if you're a medic and you are concerned about does such and such a treatment work, and you want to get the research on this, from all over the world. You consult a thing called the Cochrane database, which originally started in Oxford in England. It studies all the clinical trials for a particular treatment, comes to a decision whether a drug, say for blood pressure, works or not. It deals purely with effectiveness. It doesn't have any ideological axe to grind. So if you consult does the Cochrane database have any research on the effectiveness of sex education? It does, but you may not have heard about it. It was published in 2016, and I read somewhere that it was the quietest piece of research that was published anywhere because no press paid any attention to it. It said that the effectiveness of sex education in reducing either the incidence of sex STDs or unplanned pregnancy, that there was no evidence that either were reduced by sex education programs. It looked at studies from Africa, Europe and other places. The only things that it did show was the rates of STDs and unplanned pregnancy were reduced in Africa if children were provided with a school uniform and some sort of financial support. So this evidence is absent. You might say, well, why are we getting this sex education? Anyway, what we're looking at in Ireland is replicated in other places. There has been an outcry in California against very explicit sex education. In the UK, there's a new system just about to begin to become legal in 2020, where sex education is compulsory at secondary level. And in Ireland, in April 2018, the Minister for Education, Mr. Bruton, asked the National Council for Curriculum and Assessment, the NCCA, to review sex education in Ireland, with 6 topics to be addressed. Number 1 was consent, what it means. Number 2, developments in contraception. Number 3, healthy positive sexual expression and relationships. Number 4, safe use of the internet. Number 5, social media and its effect on relationships and self-esteem. And number 6, just added in last, LGBTQ plus matters. So in July of this year, the NCCA issued a draft report. I'm not sure when the final report will be issued, but it's worth pointing out to all of you that this draft report is open to submissions still up until Friday the 25th of October 2019. The draft describes its work involving roundtable meetings, a symposium, focus groups, school principals, schools and so on, and it looked at research and surveys of students. The National Parents Council did surveys of parents and students and so on, and the report invited written submissions, and these are also published online. I'm going to try to give you some sort of a picture of what these were like. So submissions were analysed by a member of the NCCA using a method of a critical friend. I don't know exactly what this means, but it's some sort of way of analysing what things people write down. Anyway, so I'd like to express my own reservations from personal experience about focus groups which are open to groupthink and online surveys which, like the Eurovision Song Contest, are open to manipulation. I've personally experienced that, but I haven't time to go into it there. The style of the report, not the Eurovision Song Contest. The style of the report is to make a statement and then it's backed up by a quotation from one of the study events that I mentioned. Example, statement. Students of all ages considered the heteronormative lens to which RSE is taught as problematic. They spoke about the need to have opportunities to learn about and normalise the diversity of relationships and sexual identities that exist. This is in the report. Now, it doesn't give any indication of the number of students who have this view, and I presume the language heteronormative lens doesn't come from a student. It comes from a critical friend, perhaps. But it's unlikely, I think, that a second-level student would use it. But one of the quotes used to support this statement is, "We had no education on same-sex relationships or about questioning gender identity." Brackets, post-primary student online survey. I wonder whether even this sounds like the language of a school student who seems to want to know both about same-sex relationships and gender, and it could have been, as far as I understand it, written by anybody. Discussing the question of parents and so on, said a small number of parents are vehemently opposed to RSE being taught in schools, but again there's no quantification. The views of parents are quite divergent with regard to the appropriate time for children to begin learning about relationships and sexuality. And for many parents, it's seen as something that needs to be taught incrementally from an early age. This is a quote, but again, there's no quantification or specifics. In the UK, it has been pointed out that reservations expressed by parents have been ignored. And one of the key quotes was taken from a parent. It said, "Knowledge is a protective factor not only for unintended pregnancy and STIs, but also for sexual violence." And as I've already said, the evidence of this treatment of this statement is very doubtful. So there are repeated allusions to LGBT awareness, but in the report itself without being specific as to what might be offered. There are valid concerns expressed about the dangers of pornography, social media, sexting and so on, but again without offering any clear direction. One section of the report deals with the views of stakeholders on these things. This appears to be teachers, managers, inspectors and so on, but I could see no evidence that parents were considered to be stakeholders. So, without quantifying, sorry, I'm a little bit, yeah. Yes, they refer specifically to a report. To meet best international standards, what they requires is to look at what was set down by the World Health Organization in its Standard for Sexuality Education in Europe 2010. So, this is a well-known report, I understand, and Dr. Gabriel Kubi's discussion on that particular document says, the WHO, which is a respected healthcare body, if there's an outbreak of Ebola virus, the WHO are going to be speaking about it. I don't know where they fit in with sex education, but they're being quoted as the reliable authority. The WHO functions on the anthropological premise that humans have a need for sexual activity from birth on, and they have a right to it. Adults allegedly should stimulate this need right from the beginning, speak to the child in detail at every age level about sexual acts, and give them the opportunity to live out their sexual needs free of gender stereotypes. She gives an example from the ages of 4 to 6. A child learns to name each body part, and caregivers are to wash every part of the body and talk about sexual matters in sexual language. The child should be given information about enjoyment and pleasure when touching one's own body in early childhood masturbation. I'll stop there. Anyway, interestingly, Gabriel Kubi was successful in Germany in having a sexual education book removed from the curriculum called Body, Love and Playing Doctor, which amongst other things encouraged parents to engage in sexually oriented games with their children. So it does show that maybe the public can do something about it. One can only guess as to what the likely program is. It's very vague and unspecific and couched, as I say, in diplomatic language. But one of the most frequent quotes throughout is that young people criticise RSE because it's too negative and it's all prohibitions. Unfortunately, I think RSE is going to be like that if you're going to keep your children safe. Just to go on then, one more area of this report, the NCCA published 58 of 65 written submissions. The largest number of submissions came from LGBT groups, 8. These are Belong To, LGBT Ireland, Shout Out, Spun Out, Squishy Couch, Sexual Health Centre Cork, Transgender Equality Network of Ireland, and Gender Orientation and Sexual Health Limerick. There were what I would call abortion groups. That's Amnesty, Abortion Rights Alliance and Irish Family Planning Association. So they're the largest group. The second largest group were Catholic groups, including Accord, Catholics, Trustee Schools, one diocese. Anybody like to guess? Elfin, correct, right first time. The Lumen Fidei Institute, the Iona Institute, and so on. Anyway, it is difficult to give the other groups like Atheist Ireland and Inclusion Ireland and so on. I can't give you a complete picture of the spectrum, but LGBT groups and teachers' union groups who were very much on the same line disparaged school ethos. Many advocated a standardised programme compulsory in all schools, religious or secular. Interestingly, the submission from the Irish National Teachers Organisation did not come from the union as a whole, but from their LGBT group. Of the individual submissions then, 2 came from gay activists who were teaching RSE, and 1 from a teacher who was also teaching RSE, who represented himself as teacher and member of Atheist Ireland. So that's maybe to give you some sort of flavour. Now, one interesting thing is that the National Parents Council did a survey of about 3,000 parents, asking them many questions, but did not include anything about the LGBT question. But the most striking thing in the submission from the National Parents Council, which was not covered in the report as far as I could see, was an answer to the question, how important is it that your school consults you about how it teaches RSE? 95% of parents said that was important. The next question, how important is it that the school consults you about the content of what will be taught? 97% considered it important. The report doesn't seem to cover this, and it's very clear from reading, if you take, say, the LGBT groups, Amnesty and so on, and the Catholic ones, is that the secularist ones never mention the parents. The Catholic ones all do. And in fact, overall, the Catholic submissions, I thought, had a very good feel, a positive view of people, children made in the image of God and so on. But it's in such marked contrast to the other side, which is very selfish. It's about consent, what you are entitled to do, and so on. And it's not, there's something unwholesome about it aside from what they're proposing. Now, there's considerable discussion about pornography and an acknowledgement of the serious situation of social media. It must be said, very clear solutions. Very few clear solutions offered as to what it could be done apart from more education. Some would see pornography as something to be managed rather than prohibited, to use the words, to be discussed in a stigma-free way. This despite evidence that addiction to pornography physically changes your brain and leads to increased sexual violence against women. This is something I was not aware of, and it comes from Gabriel Kubi, is that sexual abuse is a growing problem for children and teenagers among themselves. And it is in 14 to 16-year-olds who are at the greatest risk of sexually abusing children. She attributes this growing problem to sex education and pornography. When I read that, I immediately came to my mind the murder of a young girl, Anna Kriegel, of Dublin. It clearly had its origin in online pornography. And if you recall, the judge did not allow the jury access to the knowledge that one of the boys involved, aged 13, had over 5,000 pornographic images of great violence. Sister Mary Bernard referred to something very lovely this morning about, I don't know if I remember it correctly, but if a child admires somebody, they will imitate them. Unfortunately, if a child sees pornography, I think they will imitate that. And I think there's evidence of that. Secondly, as you may recall, a teacher in County Cavan murdered his wife and 3 children before killing himself. And it was clearly suggested that he had a problem with online pornography. The state so far has taken no action against this. I think that some other countries are, including England and Germany. So in this report, many people commented on the problem. Only one submission that I could identify from the Lumen Fidei Institute proposed that it's the government's task to shut this down, to remove it. Sexual imagery, we're surrounded by images, but we're bombarded with, if you get sexual images coming towards you, it has been known in the church for millennia that sexual images are dangerous. I read one saint from the 10th century dispensing spiritual advice about repentance. He said, we should examine in detail all the sins we have committed, even back to childhood. But he says, except carnal sins, for the remembrance of these is harmful. So, recalling sexual imagery can start the whole process off again. And I think a neutral stance on porn in this report One submission said it is important to discuss why it is used and how to use it in a healthy manner. There is no healthy manner. Now, I don't know how I'm doing on time. I just wanted to say then, as I say, there's a strong anti-Catholic mood in many of these submissions, and I think the marker is when you exclude the parents, who you're dealing with. So, getting towards the end, what can you or I do about the situation at the moment? First of all, you might consider making a submission, as I mentioned earlier on, to the National Council for Curriculum Assessment, NCCA. We don't know the specifics of the programme, but since the programme seems to be the same in California, in Britain and in Germany, I think we can reasonably surmise at what it's going to be like. And it's unlikely there will be any further consultation. And in my lower moments, I was wondering that maybe in practical terms the best that might be achievable by making representations would be to strongly state that no parent should be compelled to put their child through this if they don't wish it. Compulsion appears to be part of the idea in the UK, and it wasn't directly mentioned in any of these, nor was it unmentioned, if you like, with strong mood that you should have a compulsory RSE programme the same in all schools, secular or religious. They didn't say that children, only one specifically said children should be compelled to do it, but most people didn't say they should be allowed any opt-out. It seems that forcing children into it might be unconstitutional, since parents are the primary educators of their children. However, if you recall, the Children's Rights Referendum of 2012, which was put into the Constitution, says, where parents fail in their duty towards the children to such an extent that the safety or welfare of any of their children is likely to be prejudicially affected, the state, as guardian of the common good, shall endeavour to supply the place of the parents, but always with due regard for the natural and imprescriptible rights of the child. So I'd ask you, in this current climate of mistrust, could you see the state using this article to give vitally needed sex education to your children? I think it's not impossible. So, one more thing, well, maybe one or two. If it goes as it looks, can the SSPX or any other group make any influence on the state, the media, or even the courts and expect to win? I think it's a spiritual issue for sure. It endangers souls, but it's also now a political one. And taking this one issue and looking at it politically, I think if you want to influence legislators, you need to make alliances with others who take the same position, even if they don't believe the same thing or share your faith. Protecting children affects all parents. And I think it's significant that in the UK, the only significant objections to RSE has come from Muslims in the north of England. Catholics need to find allies about this issue in the public domain without compromising their own faith or asking others to compromise either. One more thing you could consider, I'm serious, but I don't know how practical it is that in other countries is to take your children out of school and teach them yourself. I'm reading a book at the moment called Get Out Now, written by two female smart lawyers in America who are strongly recommending that people should not send their children to public schools in America. They're not a fringe group, and it may be that your child, grandchild or niece may need this action if the programme turns out as bad as it could do. Now, I think that's the end of my suggestions. I just wanted there was one little story, it might have been a bit gloomy what I was saying. There was one little story that I wanted to tell you, and I want to hear an American writer called Rod Dreher. You may have heard of him. He wrote a book called The Benedict Option. It's very an international bestseller, a sort of survival manual for Catholics. It's not Benedict, the Pope he's talking about, it's Saint Benedict. And the talk he gave in Dublin is available online, but not the questions afterwards. And the questions is what I wanted to refer to. He was asked by a worried father, I think it was, what can we do about education? And it's the only option to homeschool. So Dreher in response gave this, he said he described a visit to the Czech Republic where his book was being published. and visiting of a family that had gone through the communist era and preserved their faith. The father of the family was a committed Catholic, and Catholics in Soviet or Russian or Soviet communist times took the view that we keep our heads down and wait, hopefully things would improve. He did agree with that and started to protest publicly about abuses, and he was jailed. The reason he told the story was to describe how when the children came home from school, the father, when he was around, asked in detail what they had been taught that day. If they were taught things that were wrong, like communist ideology, he would spend as long as it took to show them why it was wrong and teach them the truth. The children are now all adults. In fact, the father is dead. They're all committed Catholics. And they also described how when the father was taken away to prison, their mother went through a similar procedure along with reading them good literature. And specifically, J.R.R. Tolkien took great credit from that family for saving their children. So both parents actively educated their children in spite of the school and the state, and they succeeded. So Dreher pointed out that things are bad here, but they're not that bad. And even if they do go bad, you still have the option to educate your children yourself. Finally, how can the church help with this question? First of all, in Ireland, I think the point of having schools that are called Catholic in name, where the children are being taught lies, is not on. It's time for the church to give people secular schools if they want them, and keep Catholicism as more than just a name. If people teaching your children are like the LGBT activists I described in the submissions, then they may ruin your child's life and destroy their faith. So no Catholic school can teach what is proposed. And I think it is for the bishops to stand up and say that this is unacceptable. We cannot allow it in Catholic schools. And if it comes in, they will withdraw from the school. It would be better for children to go to school to learn mathematics and regular subjects, and that the church would provide both religious instruction and sexual education outside the school. If you look at England, I think very few people realise this, but aside from being Catholic, in many cases, or Anglican, religious schools produce excellent academic results. Parents move house to get into the catchment for religious schools, some even getting baptised and pretending to be believers so that their children can get the academic part of what a Christian education gives you. The superior results are attributed primarily to better discipline, which comes from a Christian ethos of respecting others. I don't think that the submitters of this exercise who hate ethos realise that ethos is if schools are secularized and parents begin to see the other things that go wrong academically, that they might return to looking for Catholic or Protestant schools. And I think finally we need a Christian response to all of this. These people who are convinced that they are right, they're troubled people. And the Christian response is speaking the truth, a calm exposition without hatred or anger. And these people who wish to transform sexuality are human beings too. I was trying to verify a quotation at lunchtime, which I read many years ago, which is from G.K. Chesterton, already referred to. I think he said, when a man goes to a brothel, he thinks he's looking for sexual favours, but in fact he's looking for God. And these people are on the wrong track, and it falls for us to try and rescue them. My daughter-in-law insisted I say this. She said, you have to quote Romans 1:21. For this cause God delivered them up to shameful affections, for their women had changed the natural use into that use which is against nature. In like manner the men also, leaving the natural use of the women, have burned in their lusts one towards the other, men with men, working that which is filthy, and receiving in themselves the recompense which was due to their error. St. Paul could not have been clearer. People are losing their jobs over this sexual revolution. But St. Paul also tells us we must pray without ceasing. That means 5 minutes time, 10 minutes time for the rest of your life. Several people told me after the abortion referendum that they'd never prayed so much in their lives. One said, "I never prayed so much, and this is what I got." God had failed them. God did not give them what they wanted. And what they wanted was a good thing, or so it seemed. But as the bishop says, God is in charge. We know that God provides for us because we're all here today. It's not for us to tell God what to do. We must accept his inscrutable ways and trust that he has something much greater in mind than anything we could conceive of. So it occurred to me when I was preparing this, maybe some parents in particular might have thought that I was going to give them advice on relationships and sexual education, which I'm not competent to do. But I have a little list of books which might be helpful if you're concerned about that. And thank you for listening.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Monaghan. I myself lived in Spain for 7 years working there, and in many Spanish towns, the centre of the town is called La Plaza de Cristo Rey, it's called the Plaza de la Constitución, the Plaza of the Constitution. And I was looking at an old map once, and I saw that in a particular town it used to be called the Plaza de Cristo Rey. It was the Plaza of Christ the King. I wondered, what did it change? And it turned out when the new Spanish Constitution was introduced that legalized the Communist Party and ultimately divorce and abortion, etc., they also changed the names of all the plazas from Plaza de Cristo Rey, Plaza of Christ the King, to Plaza de la Constitución. And it's not that there wasn't a constitution in Spain beforehand, it's that the new one was secular, and that they wanted to distance themselves from the law of Christ the King, which they wanted to remove from the memory of the public. The Archbishop Marcel Lefebvre said that he founded the seminary of St. Pius X to form priests who would teach the doctrine of the kingship of Christ, because that is as His Lordship Bishop Fillet said in an interview recently, the rejection of the kingship of Christ at its heart is the rejection of God himself. So we are so grateful to have the legacy of Archbishop Lefebvre to keep the teachings of the faith alive in our country, and for having put on this, offer their time and their knowledge and wisdom to His Lordship Bishop Fillet for giving us the time, travelling to the west of Ireland, and he's come to Ireland many times over the years for countless confirmations, etc. But also Father Bruciani, the District Superior for the Society St. Pius X in Ireland, and also the other priests of the Society, Father Griego, who's recently left us, who helped set this conference in motion, Father Gallagher, and especially Father Kimball and Father Ockersey, who have been working putting this conference together, and of course Father Leo Boyle in Athlone. So can we have a round of applause for that? Father Leo Boyle is the greatest. I would also like to thank our speakers, Father LaRue coming from the United States and sharing us with his wisdom from teaching in the seminary and running the seminary. Sister Mary Bernard from Kansas, and Miss Lisa Betts coming from the United States. And obviously our own Dr. John Monaghan, who was such a warrior in our Catholic tradition last year. And I'd also like to thank all the caterers, especially the McKeowns, who are such great masterminds at organising things behind the scenes. And the camera crew. And Charlie and Liam. Thank you. Great. And to give us the closing address, please welcome Father Kimball.
So I think firstly we have to thank our MC for doing a splendid job tonight. So I'll just keep it short. I think His Lordship put it very well in the beginning that God writes straight with crooked lines. And some of you will remember 2 years ago when we were here in Knock around the same time, we were here in very different circumstances. We were scrambling to find a place to say Mass, and we ended up in somebody's driveway, somebody's car park. But then the next year we found this place, and we had this idea to do something more. And so far I think it's been a great blessing for all of us to attend this. And I think it goes to show that God used this expelling from the shrine grounds to bring this about. And so it's something really to be grateful for in the end. And today I think the message was really a message of hope, despite what's going on, despite what our country is going through, despite what society is going through. I think today what we tried to do is get the dust off that light and to focus on what that light is, what the hope is. Of course, the hope primarily for us comes from prayer, and especially during this weekend, going to Our Lady of Knock and praying at her shrine, and that's the climax of the weekend, of course, is tomorrow, the pilgrimage. But also these conferences I think are very important for us. They're not in themselves, they're not a formation, but as Father Alabi put it, they're like starters in a meal. And they whet our appetite to get to know more about our faith, to understand it better so that we can hand it on. If we speak of ourselves as traditionalists, that's what tradition is. We're handing on what we received. And we have not received a lot. And so these conferences are meant to give you something and spark your interest, and then hopefully you can learn more about that and pass that on to the next generation. So thank you all very much for coming. And we hope if it's a success, if all goes well, maybe we'll revisit this and do it again next year. And next year, of course, the big year for us because it's the golden jubilee of the society, the 50 years we're celebrating. So I ask you, at the end, after this conference, we'll send out an email of just a survey. We ask you just to fill out the survey. If there's anything you think we can improve on, please give us some advice on that. And then next year, bring a friend. Spread the good word. Invite somebody else and come with somebody else. And then I have to just say one word about the In Principio. We're sort of celebrating quietly our 2-year anniversary of our In Principio. And of the most recent edition is on the Catholic family, and the one before was on Catholic education. So very fitting for the speeches, the conferences that were given today. So I encourage you to go back and pick up a copy, pick up a few copies, spread them around, sign up if you want them, if you want to receive them, and you can't, if you're too far away from our chapels, sign a friend up, but try to spread that around.
Maybe also a mention of the Lourdes pilgrimage next year, or
Yes, well, all the details is in here, so make sure you pick up one of these. And then last but not least, so normally on Sundays you have collections, but they're telling me that if we want to have a collection in the church and the shrine, that has to go to the shrine. So what I'm going to ask is if we can just pass around a basket, and today will be your Sunday collection. If you don't have any money on you, if you can just give it to Catherine at the check-in desks. So Porok, if you can get the baskets and hand them around. And while he's doing that, we will do the drawing for the smaller raffle. And we might just ask His Lordship to do the drawing for that raffle to see who is the winner of that raffle.
One other thing, once we're finished with the raffle, if everyone who's going to be singing in the choir could meet at the back of the room.
So I have to grab one?
Yes.
Also.
Just one. That's okay. They're disqualified.
Yeah, I threw them out.
The winner of this raffle, I think it's Tommy Jennings. Tommy Jennings. Tommy, you just have to verify that this is your signature. I don't know. Of course you're going to tell me it is. That's 6151528. Very good. Congratulations.
Thank you.
And just one last thing. If there are any able-bodied men that can stay back just to help to reset things for the trivia tonight. So there's a break for supper right now, but if you can come back for trivia, you're more than welcome to do that. Or even if you don't want to do that, there will be drinks. You can socialize and just relax. And there might be one more thing. Oh, there's 4 prizes, I'm sorry. Which one does he get? He gets the whiskey, okay. I don't know if this winner is eligible for alcoholic beverages. This winner is Ethan Connolly. Whatever you want, I think. The third winner is the Carney Finley. Choice. No, we won't. The left hand. Yep. Oh. The final winner of the evening is Rose O'Hagan. Congratulations. You can keep your lucky ticket. I'm afraid you only have one choice. So that concludes the events until 7:30 this evening, and you just have enough time to go out and watch Dublin lose. I mean, to watch the GAA final. I've been spending too much time in Cork. But yes, if anybody can stay, help us reset the room, I'd be very grateful. Thank you very much. God bless. We have supper, I would say, maybe in about 15 minutes. One last thing, if we could all just kneel down and His Grace will give us His blessing.
Sit nomen Domini benedictum, et Dominus Domini Domini, benedictio Dei omnipotentis, Patris et Filii et Spiritus Sancti, descendat super vos et maneat semper. Amen.
Well, that's the end of our live stream, everyone. Thanks very much for viewing. And of course, you can watch this video after it's uploaded to YouTube. Please share with everyone. Thank you and God bless you.